colleagues, friends, good afternoon to you all. It's my pleasure really to be here, and I want to express my profound gratitude to the organizers and Charles Enoch in particular for inviting me to speak at this conference. What Charles might not have known when he invited me is the special connection between myself, my countrymen, and Oxford. Oxford happens to be the home of Roger Bannister, and we all know him. The first person to run the 4-minute mile. I was last here in Oxford in June of 2016 for another conference, and the high point of that visit was my tea with Roger Bannister and his wife. So I enjoyed that very much. So it was a no-brainer really for me to say yes. But as you know, he passed away last March. And so this visit brings to me many memories of that occasion and indeed of his life. So I want to thank the organizers as well for choosing a very relevant topic for our discussion today. In my remarks, I'll set out the highlights of some of the challenges that face all of us in the pursuit of leap forward in prosperity of our continent, Africa. At the outset, I need to apologize that I will shorten my address a bit to remarks, really, because I'm also fighting a cold, which I picked up in Washington, D.C. It's amazing how many flus come out of Washington, D.C. Last time there was a bad flu, it was called the global financial crisis. So this will only maybe to go as far as Oxford and nowhere else. And I want to start by outlining a few things which I call the opportunities that we see in Africa. In Africa, 58% of the population do not have electricity. Nearly 2/3 of Africa's population depend on agriculture. 60% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa and 37% of its workforce are youth under 25. 23% of the population in sub-Saharan Africa live on $2 to $5 per day. And yet another statistic, 47% of Africa's girls either do not complete high school or never attend at all. These, by any means, are dire numbers. And it may therefore appear surprising that I label them opportunities. But I want to emphasize, I see them as opportunities, and I'll explain why. I want to underscore that actually, against these bleak statistics, we've seen real change. For instance, the macroeconomic environment has strengthened dramatically. For instance, inflation has declined. That's across Africa, has declined. Current account deficit. So, against this sort of bleak background and numbers, we have seen some positive across the continent. Current account deficits have contracted. Growth has strengthened, largely due to stronger policy frameworks, improving price of primary commodities such as oil, and also a very favorable external environment. That, I think, has been clear over the last 10 years. Actually, there has been remarkable progress. Another element would appear positively now in this light is that in 2007, Rwanda was ranked 137th in the World Bank's ease of doing business. That is with respect to the ease of registering properties. And in 2018, it was ranked 4th in the world. So that's a dramatic shift. A third element that is also positive, a pointer as it were, in Kenya, access to formal financial services increased from 26% in 2007 to 75% in 2016. Again, a remarkable leap forward. So you can see that there are three in these specific areas. Maybe 10 years ago, if we looked at the starting point, we would have said it's a hopeless case. It's a lost cause. 10 years later, you have significant improvement in each one of these. It calls to mind a famous statement by, among others, Mandela, who said, "It always appears impossible until it is done." And I think we can go back to the three, to what I call the opportunities a moment ago, and we could look at them in that same light and see that these really are challenges and the opportunities for us. And they appear impossible to us today, but they'll appear impossible until we get them done. So now I want to go back to these opportunities. These numbers, to me, the core of my question. This question allows me now to discuss the issue that is foremost in my mind in discussing opportunities and challenges in Africa, which is the failure of the financial markets in their use of information. That is key. That is what I see as the core of the problem that is before us. I will touch on this and other examples and expand on them, clarifying, which I'm sure will be clarified later and expanded by others in the rest of the conference. The first issue, if you may, is what I would call a problem that relates to the size of the risk premium or risk premium if you consider different projects. It can be argued that, for instance, you think of the educating girls, or for that matter, in the electricity sector, putting up plants to generate electricity that is needed in a particular country and so forth. Recognizing that in our markets, or rather our investments, are that from already a substantial starting point of 6.7%. My point is, this is something that we need to understand better, and I'm sure that those that will come after me can discuss this and explain why we have such large risk premium and what is it we need to do for the markets to correctly price risk. The concern could be risk, but it could also be the thin markets that we are trading in, right? So all these things need to be dealt with, and it isn't just the project that is a problem. So that is one thing that I wanted to bring on the table. But there's a related item which I think we should also be concerned about. Again, discussing risk, which is a few years ago when interest rates went low, in the markets, they came down dramatically, and there was a sort of excitement in Africa that we could even borrow Eurobonds, right? We could even issue Eurobonds. And one of the points that was, one of the reasons behind this, some people explained, is that actually to be good for the African countries to issue Eurobonds. Why? Because the pricing of these Eurobonds will serve as a disciplining effect on the African countries. So bonds have been priced appropriately by the market, to punish you, right? And you're getting correct information. The financial markets are getting correct information, data, and all that, and they're using this to, in effect, punish the underperformers, and in fact reward the ones that are doing well. It didn't work that way. Judging by the panic that was there in Washington last week, relating to the increase in an increase, it could very well be that there was no data that were provided to the markets, but they should have asked for more data. So there's something wrong with the mechanism, and there's something wrong with the way the financial system is working, And consequently, we do have a real problem in the way the markets are pricing risk, and in particular for those investments those crucial investments I mentioned a moment ago. There's a corollary to this, and I will mention it and then move on, which is the issue of differentiating country risks and prospects. What appears to me is that at times we are all countries in Africa, or a bunch of countries in Africa, could be the West African countries, could be the East African countries, or the South African countries, are all, or that other part in the middle, whatever it is, I don't know what it is, the belt of Africa kind of thing. We are lumped into the same pool, and consequently, you could think of us, and therefore investors put money in our investments, and from their perspective, they don't distinguish Kenya from Uganda or from Tanzania. As a matter of fact, they probably don't distinguish Kenya from Ghana, because both of them are English-speaking countries. There is only one problem. They are several thousand miles apart, and they are completely different economic structure. One exports gold and cocoa in Africa, which is fintech and technology more generally, that have opened doors that were never before imagined. As by Charles a moment ago, the brick and mortar model of banking that was prevalent then. But I didn't see them as disrupting banks in terms of banks' objectives and indeed customers' objectives. Unless, of course, the disruptors would have us believe that the bank's objectives was inherently anti-technology. So they're sort of Luddites. And therefore, they from their perspective, they are disrupting the Luddites. So in a sense, I find that label somewhat villainizing the banks, something that I don't think I would agree. But anyway, that's probably neither here nor there. But that's one of my pet peeves, as I said a moment ago. But in terms of the substance, there's been progress that has been made, a lot of progress, as I mentioned, which has allowed banking services to do two particular things. First, to break the location and timing of transactions with the brick and mortar model. That's really what has happened. So you can actually make a transfer from the comfort of your own kitchen or the comfort of your own office. I mean, right here, I can make a transfer to my mother, right here from my bank or through M-Pesa. Or I can actually buy, in a different setting, I can actually buy treasury bills of our government today and now from this room. So it has opened a whole new vehicle, but separating the location and timing of the transactions with the very rigid location and timing that is imposed by the brick and mortar model that we know in commercial banks. The other thing it has done is to reduce the minimum size of transfers. So you can actually now make, like I said, transfer a very little amount without going to the bank. I wouldn't go to the bank to make a transfer for, I don't know, 20 shillings or $20. But I can do that on